past in education, and he is still claiming online to be a nurse and a nurse educator, with doctor as his title, a stethoscope as his logo. He is not registered with the NMC still. I can well imagine the kind of education he is giving. Celebration, affirmation and kindness, inclusion and self-ID in healthcare. Really, the NMC should have resisted the corrupting influence of gender ideology. Nowhere does truth matter more than in healthcare. It matters in the NMC Code 2015, which compels all clinicians to put the interests of patients first. It says, you make their care and safety your main concern and make sure that their dignity is preserved, that their needs are recognized, assessed and responded to. Yet we know this principle is routinely neglected for women when the wishes of men who pretend to be women are prioritized. So we know that men are stepping in as female chaperones, completely negating the safeguarding of that role. They are being assigned to women patients who have asked for female-only care at home or in hospital. And as patients, they are assigned side rooms without the clinical need for them, on one occasion causing 2 kidney transplant patients to be treated in an open bay, resulting in serious infections for one of them. As staff, these men are moving into female changing rooms. It is profoundly shocking to see the extent to which NHS trusts have closed ranks around them and colluded with the men and punished the women raising complaints, even though they have a legal right to same-sex fertilities under the workplace regs and the Equality Act. Sandy Peggy and the Darlington nurses are 2 such cases. There is another case which you may never hear about officially, as the victim is at the beginning of her nursing career. In her first job post-qualification, she should have been enjoying the first year as a newly qualified nurse. Instead, she has been subjected to sexual harassment in her changing room by a man pretending to be a woman. He is over 6 foot tall, and she had to change her job to get away from him. And she said she blamed herself. She really wanted to be progressive and inclusive, clearly noting that everyone around him colluded and supported him. But she couldn't bear it anymore. After she moved jobs, he raised concerns about her performance, just as Dr. Upton did about Sandy Peggy. What sort of man is he? Well, when she asked him one day, "How are you?" he responded by telling her that he liked to put objects in his anus, but he used a much cruder word for his anus. Now, the appropriate response to that would be, "That's disgusting, mate," and walk away. But women are being denied the right to do that, to express disgust and to walk away to their own space. Gender ideology has facilitated the erasure of our boundaries by those institutions who should know and practice safeguarding. Single-sex spaces are an absolute necessity for our freedom and safety, but we are punished when we find these men disgusting, as all men who wish to erase women's boundaries are. And they should not be appeased and flattered and celebrated, but acknowledged as men. Increase the bandwidth of what it means to be a man. The cost of allowing gender ideologues to corrupt institutions and disrupt safeguarding is extremely high, as we saw in the case of Stephen Ireland of Pride in Surrey. He has been jailed now for 30 years, 24 years in jail, 6 years on extended license, for sex offences against children, giving a 12-year-old boy crystal meth before raping him. Concerns were raised 6 years earlier by women in Pride in Surrey. Stephen Ireland was pushing the celebration, affirmation, inclusion rhetoric in schools. He appointed himself head of safeguarding, and he set up a helpline for LGBTQ+ children. He refused to relinquish this, even for a weekend. Why? Because he was collecting images of children being sexually abused and tortured. It is highly possible that he used the abuse disclosures by children as a background to masturbation. he is in jail, his ex-boyfriends have taken on the safeguarding role. Crystal meth-smoking dog fetishists. I urge you to listen to us women raising the alarm for years. Respect women. In the NHS, we are 89% of nurses, 57% of patients, and over 50% of doctors. Respect women, listen, and change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, Sally.
Well done. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I always forget. How do I...
We've come here today. My name is Kellie-Jay Keen. This is Let Women Speak. And the reason we're here today, thank you so much. The reason we're here today is the Nursing and Midwifery Council has failed to stand up for patients. Very recently, although he did eventually get struck off, there was a man who wore PVC fetish nursing gear in his spare time, and he was promoted to be head nurse of one of the chronic trauma mental health wards for women only. And the first thing he did, with high praise I might add, was to move his office to where those women sleep. And there were nurses in charge of other mental health units for women who supported him and cheered him on. Now, why on earth would you ever promote a man who wears a fetish to work to be the head nurse of a trauma ward for women who are really seriously mentally unwell? And many of those women's trauma would be caused by male violence and male sexual violence. So the Nursing and Midwifery Council, as a reminder, let's just remind you what they do. Well, they take a lot of money, that's what they do. But they call women birthing persons, cervix havers, menstruators. They don't call women women. In fact, the only people in the NHS that the nurses will call women are men. They also will tell you that women can have penises, and they will also encourage the practice of men taking copious amounts of hormones so those men can put their nipples in a baby's mouth to get sucked and call it breastfeeding. The whole thing is disgusting. It should make you all not want to pay your taxes. Now, what we'll see is young women who have been gaslit, who are a bit too simple to understand that they've been gaslit, and they will support the notion that women have penises. And that's because really they failed to grow up. Just thought she might be one of them. So, we here say that no woman has a penis, no man has a vagina, there's no such thing as non-binary, and transitioning children is profound abuse. And the next time that one of the politicians knocks up on your door and talks about the cash-strapped NHS, just remind them that as a bare minimum, the NHS spends £50 million a year on diversity and inclusion hires. And let me remind you, that's not helping people with disabilities go to work. That is making sure that men who call themselves women get treated as women by the NHS. When Let Women Speak did some research to find out whether the NHS differentiates between a man who calls himself a woman or a woman, only 4 trusts said that if a man didn't have a gender recognition certificate to recognise himself as a fictitious legal woman, he would be treated differently. Otherwise, the rule in the NHS seems to be if you call yourself a woman, you are treated as a woman. I will pass to, are you ready? You ready? Can I introduce you?
Yes, go on then.
So this is Susan Evans, who is the OG of whistleblowing in 2004 against the Tavistock for sterilising children.
That's a big introduction.
Well, that's true.
It's the first time I've been to one of your events.
Shame.
So I know, I'm ashamed, but when Kellie-Jay told me that she was doing something outside the Nursing and Midwifery headquarters, I, as a trained nurse, I've trained doubly. I was a state registered nurse back in the old days, and I was also a registered mental health nurse. I feel that I have a certain perspective on this, and I really want to speak up for other nurses particularly, but also all health workers who somehow get caught into this, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But I've made a few notes, but I'm happy to be interrupted. Back in about 2003, I got a very small part-time post at the Tavistock Gender Identity Development Service, as
Can
it was known
you
then.
just move over a little bit so
And,
someone can
my
scan that? Thank you so
background
much.
was in mental health work and psychotherapeutic assessment
That's all
and
right, stay there, just stay
interventions
there,
and
don't bother.
treatments. I went to work on the unit feeling very curious and interested to know what was going on with kids who felt so uncomfortable in their body, and then very quickly realised that there were staff at the clinic who were prepared to give children puberty blockers, and what they are, they're things that interfere with the ordinary hormonal development of children. So these are young teenagers who feel confused, they often have comorbidities, they are often on the autism spectrum, they have sometimes suffered traumas with a capital T or with a small t, or they may be homosexual and be very uncomfortable about their sexuality during their teenage years or earlier. So I think the thing that I couldn't come to terms with as soon as I encountered it, and neither does that little dog going along there, was that something felt, so out of the ordinary from the usual mental health work that went on at the Tavistock. Secondly, I couldn't believe that we were going to interfere with the normal natural development of healthy bodies because the mind was telling the person something about themselves. So initially I tried to raise concerns within the team, but what I encountered was a kind of a conveyance that I was thinking wrongly, or that I was small-minded, or that I was, and they never used this word back then, but it was intimated, sort of transphobic in some way. But what I wanted to do was to do a holistic assessment and work with a child, and what I knew from previously working on other adolescent units elsewhere in my career, is that children, particularly teenagers, take a long time to engage, a long time to trust you, and a long time to assess and to get to know. So the idea that someone could be seen 4 times, which is what happened even back in 2004, 4 times, and then be commenced on something that is life-altering, horrified me. I felt sick in my stomach. I tried my best within the team. I then, as you say, I did go and blow the whistle, and I spoke to the senior management at the Tavistock. So back then, what I would also say is that Tavistock did do something about it. This is now 2005. Dr. David Taylor did a very serious report, raised all sorts of concerns, and essentially the report was buried. And things progressed, and it was really too uncomfortable to carry on working there. I couldn't be a part of it, and so I left. Wind forward several years, and what I'm going to say is, and I want parents to be aware of this, the activists within this realm have started to educate your children and unfortunately, it starts really early, you know, at preschool and in primary school. So all parents, check your children's reading materials at school. Also, that goes for all the other child groups that your kids are involved in. But I'll get back to the point here. What they said was that the puberty blockers would give the children time to think. What it actually did, they used to say, it's a pause for thought. But what we have now learned is it's a full stop on development, both physical and mental. And I don't think in any world, no matter how much it may be pleaded that they can, there is no way to assess which of these children might go on in their adult lives to feel they want to present in the other gender, but there is no way of knowing what a child will believe and think when they are an adult. So I think it's absolutely been my cause to campaign against this. The staff in 2018 at the Tavistock, the JIDS was now enormous because so many children had been groomed online, unfortunately, and in their social peer groups. So what happened was a number of staff whistle blew again, raising huge concerns that now some children were only seen for 1 or 2 assessments before they were commenced on life-altering hormones. They also were doing, effectively, experiments because this particular research programme was then enlarged to include Tanner stage 2 children. And that is basically any child who has started the second stage of puberty. So that could be a child as young as 10 or 11. They hadn't done any research evaluation at that stage, but they decided to widen the group. So now we have children from the age of 10 or 11 commenced on puberty blockers. Despite what they say, these are harmful. Then they progressed across sex hormones. And finally, when they were persuaded, and I'll come back to the judicial review, but when they were persuaded to reveal what was going on in this research, lo and behold, it turned out that virtually 99% of the children started on hormone blockers had progressed to cross-sex hormones. If you block a child's puberty at Tanner stage 2 and they go on to cross-sex hormones, you have likely sterilised them. So I, at this stage, came back into it because there was an event at the House of Lords, Standing for Women at the time, I think it was, arranged an event at the House of Lords, which is where we met, and it was a key event because Lord Mooney at the House of Lords invited a group of concerned clinicians, teachers, GPs, and they spoke, and my husband Marcus Evans spoke because he had been a governor who had resigned as a result of the fact they were trying to cover up David Bell's report from the second lot of whistleblowers. Sorry, I'm going all over the place here, but I think the most important thing to say was that out of that, I met parents who felt their children had been commenced on a harmful treatment programme or were fearful they were about to be at JIDS. And then I also came across a lawyer who was prepared to represent me. So I started and put together a judicial review which became known as the Kira Bell, the Bell v Tavistock Judicial Review. And finally, the world could get to look at the books of the Tavistock. They finally had to answer questions because until that time, whenever anyone said anything, Marcus went on Radio 4 and said he was very concerned they were trying to cover things up and they weren't reporting the staff concerns to the board. And the CEO, Paul Jenkins, just said, we're a world-class service, there's nothing to see here. And kept on saying it. So until we did the judicial review, I think that would have continued. And this is what I want to say to the NMC and anyone in the building, is we cannot allow these things to go on. If we feel something is going wrong and we can't solve it within the service, we need to take it out of the service. I encourage nurses and other NHS workers, if you feel something has gone wrong, or your instinct, not even your training necessarily, but your instinct is saying this is wrong, certainly if you feel threatened as a staff member, as the nurses who were asked to change in the same changing room as a man would have done, you need to raise concerns as much as you can and keep speaking out. And if necessary, and I didn't want to, but go to the law. And I think it is a lot of the illegal cases which have made a difference in this area, or the threat of legal cases. So I'll just come back, because I've probably used up my time, have I? Or I'll just come back to, I think part of the problem is that the societal and political activism has created a problem in what was previously a clinical setting. So as clinicians, we've been afraid to back ourselves, and nurses need to talk out. I was a nurse, and that's what I did, and I've carried on doing it, not because I'm a transphobe, I don't think, not because I'm a bigot or a right-wing Christian fundamentalist. I don't actually go to church, apart from weddings. But what I would say is that I've lost my thread because a very famous person just went past.
Yes, Louis, hi. Can you please stop endorsing the transitioning of kids? Thanks so much. Puberty blockers are dangerous and evil. Thanks.
Louis Theroux just went past. It completely blew my mind. I thought maybe you'd invited him.
No, he just follows me around.
Ah, okay. I'm not sure he's a fan of ours, but anyway, I thought I've completely lost my thread. Maybe I've seen enough, but I also, just to say, the Tavistock was closed down. Eventually, the CQC did another report. They originally were rating it very good, and then lo and behold, after the judicial review, they said it was unacceptable and it was closed down. The CAS review was done, and that proved after 4 years that there is very little, virtually no evidence to suggest that children are benefiting or are being helped by puberty blocking and cross-sex hormones. If they want to do it as an adult, that's another conversation, but my feeling is we have to protect the children and we have to talk out about this. I'm repeating myself. The reason I then took another judicial review just last week was because some of the staff who'd been quite active at the Tavistock JIDS during those years just before it was closed and had been transitioning children and medicating children and participating in what was deemed to be a substandard service and closed, those people were setting up a clinic, going to ask the CQC for a license. The CQC gave them a license, and Dr. Aidan Kelly and other staff members at Gender Plus Hormone Clinic are now able to administer 16-year-olds cross-sex hormones. These are life-altering drugs. They are not reversible. And my feeling is that children at the age of 16 are not sufficiently developed or mature enough to make that kind of decision, especially given their background and their comorbidities. So the last thing I'd say is really, I'm going to turn around and say, the Supreme Court made a judgment. The Equalities Act says that women, if there is a single-sex service available, we are entitled to ask for that. And I also want to say, stop the promotion of the flags and the transitioning of children in hospital services. It's not ethical. That's my lot. Is that all right? I went all over the place. I'm so sorry.
Great. You saved up all the years. No, it's wonderful. Just clip it off. Thank you very much. Well, it was good to see Louis Theroux because he's one of the people that's promoted it to make transitioning and sterilising children seem sort of normal or noble, in fact. But, you know, it took a lot of money for him to change his mind when he used to disagree with it and said we should be cautious. I wonder how much money that was, Louis. So we are here today because we are Let Women Speak, and we recognise the dangerous practices of the NMC in its failure to support its members when it comes to enabling women to have single-sex spaces who work in the NHS. And we know that they won't protect any of their staff. And what makes it even worse is that there will be some of those members who are men with an autogynephile fetish who go to work and have a jolly good time pretending to be women